Thank you again for joining. We're going to get started. Good morning or good afternoon. Happy Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Month. Today we are here for our Focus On featuring Ricardo Thomas. And I'll just give a little information about Compassion and Choices. Compassion and Choices is the nation's largest and oldest nonprofit focused on expanding choice and improving care at end of life. And we do that through advocacy and education. Our mission is that we envision a society that affirms life and accepts the inevitability of death, and embraces expanded options for compassionate dying, and empowers everyone to choose the end-of-life care that reflects their values, priorities, and beliefs. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization with over 450,000 supporters around the 50 states, Washington, D.C., Guam, the American Samoa, and Puerto Rico. And we began this series as really an enhancement of our community engagement work, where we're really meeting people where they are in terms of planning and having informed discussions about end-of-life care. We know that this is a very tough topic, but it's necessary. And we know that end of life is something that we're all going to have to face. So having these tools and having these conversations and access to our resources is really a way to make sure that you have planning, which we know equals peace, if you've been watching our Focus Ons. So we joined efforts with the development team because, as Ricardo says, a lack of planning is hazardous for your health and for your wealth. And so financial planning is just as important as your healthcare planning. And so we brought this series together so we can really help you protect your legacy and make sure that you leave behind the memory that you want for your loved ones. And making these plans is really the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for your community. And we want every community to be empowered with this information, which is why this collaboration exists. So I'm excited to continue this series where we'll keep deep diving into these critical aspects of end-of-life planning. And today, as we celebrate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Month, I will turn it back over to Sam and Ricardo. Thank you guys so much, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. My name is Sam Young. I'm the Managing Director of Plan Giving and Strategic Advisor at Compassion and Choices. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Focus On with Ricardo Thomas, where we cover various topics surrounding effective end-of-life planning. As Brandy said, we know that planning equals peace, and financial and estate planning are essential to your end-of-life plan. It is our objective to provide you with sound information that allows you to create the legacy you desire. With that said, let's meet Ricardo Thomas, our host today, and our special guest, Suzanna. Ricardo?
Thank you, Sam. And hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Focus On. I am very, very excited today about this interview with our very, very special guest, Miss Suzanna Tiapula. And as Brandy mentioned earlier, we are celebrating Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities this month. And of course, our focus always is on the importance of end-of-life planning. So during our interview today, we're asking for our guest, Suzanna, to share her very special experience as it relates to end-of-life planning, but also just her personal journey. So Suzanna, welcome to the program today. And you're on mute, so before we get started, so I'll say welcome, Suzanna.
And aloha. Thank you very much, and I'm so excited to be here today.
Certainly, we're glad to have you here today. Very, very excited. So we're going to get right into the program. So with that being said, obviously, we had an opportunity to speak leading up to today's interview, and I was quite inspired and motivated. So for our audience today, can you share a little bit with our audience part of your life experience, your journey, and what led you on your career path to where you are now?
I think when I reflect back, my family had always envisioned more. You know, from when I was tiny, I grew up in American Samoa, which is an island in the South Pacific. And we knew from kindergarten, really, that you were going to have to leave to go to college. My grandfather was a judge, but he was a non-law trained judge. He was a chief, a Matai title holder, and they had Samoan chiefs sit in panels as part of the judiciary. And the judges would fly from island to island to hear court cases or go by boat. And from probably age of 7, 8, my parents would send me with the judges, and I would go with my grandfather and a group of old people from island to island. And I would sit and I'd sit and listen as they heard different land cases and opined. And I just remember, even from being tiny, being involved in sort of our community and what it meant to be a community and how to grow.
Gotcha. Interesting. So with that experience there of seeing firsthand what the judges do and the importance of what they provide to the community, how did that impact you as it relates to your career decision here? Obviously I did some research, and, oftentimes we use the terminology that, oh, this particular person is a people person, or they have a passion for people. Let me tell you, audience, if you had the opportunity to see her curriculum vitae as I did, truly you would see that she has a passion for helping people. So with that experience there of being around those chiefs and looking at your vast career experience, what was it? What was that single thing you would say that really motivated you to select what you're doing now?
I think the single greatest influence in my life was my family. Being a Polynesian woman, I used to tell people, I think there's no greater gift than to be a Samoan woman, because there's so many Samoan leaders who are female. The only time the Samoan Islands were ever united was under a female chief. And pretty much every Samoan woman you meet will tell you about this. Salamasina united all of the islands of the Samoan archipelago. So to be a Samoan female was a gift. I also think my family was somewhat non-traditional. My father was a farmer and a spear fisherman, and he took me out spearfishing. So as a teenager, I would go spearfishing, usually at night, and we'd fish until 1, 2 in the morning, go home, I'd sleep, and then get up and go to school. And I know that sounds terrible from a child labor standpoint, but I can tell you, I have never been more proud than when my family would serve something that I had caught, and that would be served, and I had contributed to it, and it was glorious. So although I did well in school, I like to think they would have prioritized that, and I'm sure they did, but they also prioritized our contribution to the family and to the community, taking care of ourselves. And I think that's been my driving influence throughout my life, is how do I contribute to this world while I'm here.
Gotcha. And we would be remiss if we would not add to that, to your vast experience beyond being a professional spearfisher, but also stating that you are a practicing attorney as well. And so certainly that contributes to a lot of the work that you do. So as we kind of pivot from that and utilizing that as a starting point, let's talk about end-of-life planning, and particularly in the communities that we are celebrating today. Talk to us about how is it perceived? What are the concerns and issues that you see from your experience as it relates to end-of-life planning?
I spent decades as a prosecutor and handled cases that were very dark. My gift to myself in the second half of my career is that I get to be a part of positive peace building. And I look at what you do as positive peace building. You're trying to create the world for everyone, including those at end of life. In my community, and in many communities, I believe, there is a concern that we're not talking about dying, but we need to. We need to. We can't just talk about respite care. We can't just talk about the pieces that we're comfortable with, because we have to take care of those who are dying. And we, as individuals who will one day die, should be planning for this. It's like not planning for a birth. We plan for all of it. This whole wonderful, lovely life of ours. We plan for it. We do the best we can as a society and as individuals. So it's this great joy. It is with great joy that I am part of Compassion and Choices efforts to build this beautiful space where we can not only explore sort of the meaning of life, but how we honor that life and how we end it, how we leave, how we choose what that looks like. I don't know that there's any greater gift to give.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you're right. Certainly, we plan coming into this world, and certainly we should plan while we leave this world. And it's so critical because we know that the end of life brings on a lot of challenges. The obvious challenge is, the emotional impact of losing a loved one. But speaking at it, from a professional end, we know that there are legal impacts of that, financial impacts, and so forth. And the only way to reduce, those challenges that we know are inevitable is to properly plan. So with that, I'm going to move to the next question here, and it's related to what we're talking about, the end of life planning and so forth. In my research, I was fascinated to see that you've incorporated both the arts and culture into your process of teaching about the importance of end-of-life planning and so forth. Can you elaborate on that as to how do you utilize arts and culture to get the message across, and what kind of results that you've seen from that?
Absolutely. And it's going to be a little bit roundabout. My background before I went to law school was more technical. So I had studied ocean engineering in grad school. My legal degree, they actually accepted 12 engineering hours towards my legal degree, my Juris Doctorate. And art and science are two different ways of understanding the world. Sort of the juxtaposition of art and science is how we understand and process this space of ours. Whenever we talk about meaning, we're really talking, our artists and the arts help us understand and clarify, articulate what that meaning would be. And I'll give you an example. An astronomer will build a telescope that might see something that happened 10 million or 10 billion years ago, but it's an artist who's going to talk about touching the heavens.
Wow.
So if we as human beings want to understand our lives and get in touch with what is the meaning of my life, what is my life, who am I, that's going to be through the arts, always.
Wow. That is fascinating. That is fascinating. And let me take a moment to say this for those of you who are joining us today. If you have any questions for our guest, we do have the Q&A box open. Time permitting, at the end, we will try to address some of those questions. And also, at the conclusion of today's episode, you will receive a follow-up email, which will also include a link to today's fascinating interview. So be on the lookout for that as well in the next couple of days. I wanted to make sure I put those 2 points out there for anyone who may be interested in joining us by posing a question, and also for anyone who would want to share this information with a friend or family member going forward. So Suzanna, let's continue to with the conversation here. So as we talk about the arts, and you made the differentiation, from the artist standpoint to the engineering standpoint. Let's talk about some of the things you've actually done in the community, specifically as it relates to end of life planning, and what some of that methodology is, and how has that been received?
Well, I won't talk about what I've done, but I will talk about Compassion and Choices,
Okay.
and how they have engaged with different arts partners. So
Okay.
there are a number of incredibly exciting initiatives that allow us as a people and as a society, community, to reflect upon the meaning of life. And one of the most exciting was a series of productions, musical productions, where local artists, Pacific artists and Native Hawaiian artists were able to be produced, and their music is provided to them. They're able to use those pieces. And I hope you might send out, the most recent clip. But we have a Native Hawaiian artist who sang in both English and Hawaiian, and she talked about the meaning of life, the meaning of her life, and what it meant. And honestly, for Compassion and Choices to have that vision, thank you, Chief Engagement Officer Brandy Alexander, to have the vision to see that when we talk about end of life, we're really talking about life. What is our life? Who are we? How do we explore that? How do we share it? How do we build? And that is amazing. We had an art summit recently, and at the art summit here in Hawaii, we honored local organizations, Hilo Education and the Arts Repertoire Theater, that goes into senior residences and performs and does performances out in parks and invites senior community members to join them. There's also a musical group which includes high school band directors. So they bring high school students and they go into senior communities. And if there are musicians within that community, these high school students play with these older, community members, and then they perform for those communities. And at first I thought, oh, these aren't going to be very good. They are hauntingly beautiful. And it is multi-generational, and you bring the community together, and it is absolutely amazing to see what we can build with intentionality, which is what I think Compassion and Choices does so incredibly well. And it's more than a brochure. It actually, it touches the heart of our community, and it allows people to examine who they are, what they want, and how to get there. It's beautiful. And I hope everyone gets the chance to see it. So I will send you the link to this most recent performance.
Please
because
do.
It's lovely.
Wow, I am so glad you shared that with us. And with that, and kind of going back a little bit on what I mentioned earlier about some of the challenges we face, both financially and legally. Let's go back and revisit that again, because we know that there are certainly, legal challenges, from an estate planning standpoint, or plan giving, what do we do, to keep the legacy going? From your vast experience, when the subjects of estate planning come up, writing a will, advance directives, and things of that nature, what has been your experience as it relates to your community, as it relates to those conversations surrounding those types of concerns and instruments being utilized?
One of the struggles for many Pacific peoples is the fact that we didn't have a money-based economy. It's not our background. So we don't have the narrative of, I'm going to earn a lot. I'm from a potlatch culture where my value as a human being is measured by what I give away, not what I earn. And so the whole idea of planning for wealth distribution is hard if you don't even acknowledge, if we don't have wealth. In my community, I grew up washing clothes in a river. My village didn't, and that sounds terrible, except that the river was beautiful. There was a waterfall. I played all day long. And at the end of the day, I would take home some muddy clothes. My village didn't get a road until the year I left for college. So there are struggles in that many in my community are not financial, don't have a lot of financial wherewithal, but we still have choices, and there are legal services. So one of the things we've done here is we go out of our way to ensure that legal aid and other organizations that provide legal services can engage with community members and help them to plan, because everyone can plan and should plan. There are so many different issues with respect to our health, the medical directives. It is partially planning for wealth, but it's also partially planning for how do I leave this world of mine? And what control do I have over what happens?
So to that end, and let's advance that conversation a little bit there. So obviously, I'm glad you made that distinction about the standpoint of finances, or the financial side is not the emphasis. But let's talk about the health side of it a little bit more. And we know just in general, talking about end of life for anyone, for most, can be a challenge. So from the standpoint of the differences in culture and so forth, and trying to engage between, because what I'm seeing oftentimes is that the younger generation having to go back to their parents or grandparents and trying to initiate these conversations, because being able to tune in to programs just like this, folks have a heightened awareness and say, well, you know what, I need to go back and check with mom and dad or grandma and grandpa to make sure things are in line. So what are you seeing with that as it relates to the health choices? Are those conversations being advanced, or do you see that as being a challenge culturally as well?
It's interesting. I think there are cultural strengths, and I always try to look at discussions of sort of how culture intersects.
Mhm.
From a strengths-based analysis, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the strengths that I see. As a Polynesian, as a Samoan, my base unit of identity is that of family, not individual. So for example, an introduction would be Oa'u Tiapula, I am Tiapula. And Tiapula is actually a piece of land. So once you hear Suzanna Tiapula, and I wouldn't bother with the Suzanna, I would say Oa'u Tiapula, I am Tiapula. You know that it's one side of a mountain in between Awa and Alau. So you know who I am. So the strength in talking to many in the Pacific community, and I'm talking to folks who are probably a little bit more traditional, because the diaspora community, we have the whole spectrum. Third generation children who have grown up and loved Britney Spears. But from the more traditional, the strength is that we care for our families. And part of this planning means, and is required, I have to plan so that they, I won't say suffer less, but to do everything that I can do to transition in a way that nurtures those around me and nourishes my family and those who love me and this place.
Wow. Gotcha. So as we're starting to draw to a close here now, and we want to make sure we get some of the salient points out. And again, to anyone, if you have any questions, please enter that in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to some of those before we close out. But what would you say in your experience, and obviously dealing with a lot of these issues here that we've been talking about, and not to put you on the spot, but I will. What would you advise as the top 5 things that you would say that individuals would need to do or should focus on as it relates to their end of life plans?
That's a great question. First, they need to plan. And they need to plan now. And I think doing it with the community, where you do it with everyone you know and you reach out. There's a regional group, Pacific Women's Indigenous Network, and they work in every one of the countries in the Pacific. And they are incredibly excited about this because the choices are individual, but the process is one that needs to happen. And this is an incredible opportunity to begin that planning. You never wait. You sit down right now and would talk to you, Ricardo, as a financial advisor. And then I would talk to someone about what are the medical options available to me and what does that look like and how. So I think you asked me for the 5 tips. I think there's one.
Okay.
Do it. You plan and you don't put it off. And you say, no, this is exciting because this is an opportunity for me both to plan for the future, but also to reflect on who I am and what that means. And then how do I honor that space appropriately?
Gotcha. Well, thank you. So we went from 5 to 1, but I like that one. So with that, you mentioned about the distinction, especially now with the 3rd generation, the Britney Spears generation, if you will. Are you finding that they're more receptive to these conversations in this newer generation, as opposed to, say, for lack of a better word, the legacy kind of thinking as it relates to these issues here?
I only mentioned that one actress or singer because I don't know any others. I really
I'm with you. I'm right there with you.
I grew up in a village. I just don't know any. I'm sure there's someone who's much more modern. I think they have the full spectrum. You know, they're a part of this society, and our society is multicultural and has so many different experiences. And I think they have the benefit of having, and you know, I've heard the phrase straddled both worlds. I've never known anyone who stands in the middle and straddles. I know that you're either immersed in one, immersed in another, but when you're immersed in the one, you benefit from all that incredible exposure to the other. So for those generations that have, you know, second and third, fourth generation, I think they have the beauty and power of a heritage that gives them an opportunity to reflect on being something different, something before. And they also have access to this crazy, beautiful world of ours. So I actually like their chances. I do think they have resources that perhaps many of us who are first generation immigrant or who are still in our communities did not have.
Gotcha. And I was quickly reminded it's not Britney Spears anymore, it's Taylor Swift.
See, I don't even know.
How could I forget? But before we close out, I did want to add this question, ask you this question as it relates to the LGBTQ plus communities. Can you tell me a little bit about your work there, and particularly in the communities that we're talking about, any efforts and things of that nature?
That's actually a really exciting area. Do you know that I grew up where we had multiple genders? So we have a phrase called fa'afitama, fa'afine, and they were very normal. And it wasn't in anything. People were just fa'afine, which fa is in the way of woman, someone who presents as perhaps having feminine characteristics, regardless of whatever their biological gender was, and fa'afitama in the way of male. And so I grew up with many different genders that were normalized throughout. And so culturally, throughout the Pacific, there's many different lenses. And, you know, each culture is different, each society is different, but that's the one I was raised in. The really exciting work happening now is, for example, there's Crossover Cabaret, which is a whole group of artists that have said, no, we were denied all these different parts and roles and identities because of how I look. And as a woman of color, I love this idea that I'm not defined by how I look. So they're actually going to explore whatever genre music they have ever wanted, and they're going to share that with the world as part of their narrative. And that's happening June 29th here in Hilo. So I invite Hilo, Hawaii. So I invite everyone on this call to come to that performance. It should be incredible. And it's also, they're going to use that to build a center, a Pacific center from which to explore how we navigate this world.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that information. And guess what? We do have a question here that I'm going to pose to you. And the question is, can you speak to the language we use when talking about advanced care planning, and how can we better communicate what we're talking about to diverse communities? They go on to say that they just spoke with a person recently who mentioned that he felt that the term estate planning doesn't apply to him because he doesn't have an estate. I've heard that one before, and I'll let you comment on that first. But once he understood it, it was more about legacy. It made sense to him. So any thoughts on what I just mentioned there? I know there was a lot packed into that. Basically, how can we better communicate the importance of this to diverse communities?
I think that's a really incredible question, and I'm really glad it was asked. The idea of estate is foreign to me also. My family that, you know, has lived on the same piece of land for 3,000 years, and we can't actually give it to anyone else. Like, you can't sell it. It's part of our legacy. So the planning is, how do we plan as a human being for end of life? How do I plan for those around me, my family, my community? And that is actually the language I use. You know, if there is wealth to be distributed, and that's an if, then we talk about that. But I talk about planning for end of life as an individual, as part of a family, part of a community, and what should happen and how do you want to honor that life? That is the language I use every single day.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that. And certainly, if I can just add a tidbit, you know, with that, oftentimes I've heard in speaking to various different audiences, where folks, of humble beginnings or humble means say, well, a state, well, that doesn't apply to me. Like you're saying that, well, I don't have anything to give. And obviously, once we break it down and help them to understand or give them a different perspective on it, it helps them to see what resources are available. And like you said, put it in the right perspective to know the importance of what legacy they do have to pass on. And more importantly, as I like to say, is the fires that they can help to put out or keep out, you know what I mean, at the end of life by having, those important conversations. So with that, Suzanna, I want to say thank you again. It was a pleasure having an opportunity to meet you a few days back. Again, I was very much excited about today's interview and what you had to share with our audience. I certainly invite you to come back again. Trust me, this will not be the last time that you will be interviewed here with our Focus On series. For anyone who's interested in getting more information as it relates to Compassion and Choices, our Planned Giving department, who does a great job of supporting us with this, we have the information on the screen. Again, for all of you who register to participate in today's program, you will receive a follow-up email in a couple of days with a link as well to today's session. And we also invite you to the Compassion and Choices YouTube channel. So for any of you that may be interested in any of the previous episodes that we've put together, please go over to the YouTube channel, check out the information that's there. I'm sure you'll find some valuable information, not only for yourselves, but something that you can share with your friends and family as well. Again, Suzanna, thank you very much for sharing a little bit of your time with us today. I really enjoyed it. I know the participants did as well, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
And thank you to everyone who joined us today, and be on the lookout next month for the next episode of Focus On. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day.